Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. We are here for my mid-June reading wrap-up. I have 18 books that I've already read this month to talk about today, which is so exciting because I have been in a bit of a reading slump. Really, well, March, April, and May, I read like 25 books each in each month. And that's not terrible by any means, but I'm used to reading at least like 30-ish books a month. And there was just a lot going on in my life during those months. In May, I got sick. I got strep throat, which led to laryngitis, so I completely lost my voice. So anyway, I am now completely recovered, and I'm just so happy that in June I have been able to already read so many books, and I have already read a ton of 5-star books, which is just always amazing. It's kind of weird to be filming this because I just filmed my May wrap up last week. So it's a little weird to be filming another Get Ready With Me wrap up so soon, but I am excited today. I'm doing a purple eyeshadow look, which is why I changed the color in my lamp to purple. And I think I'm gonna use my Juvia's Place The Violets palette. This is what it looks like. And here is the color story that we have going on. I adore this palette because it's one of the few affordable palettes that I found that is truly a cool toned purple palette. You'll notice that a lot of purple palettes, I have one right here by Colourpop. This is the It's My Pleasure palette. This one, yes, it's technically, ooh, that's shiny. Yes, it's technically a purple palette, but it's very like warm tone purples and pinks. It's very unusual to find a good quality actual purple palette because purple eyeshadow is actually really hard to get right, like texture and pigment wise and all of that. I already have my foundation and concealer done so that I can just go ahead and get into eyeshadow. So let's go ahead and get into the books that I read so far this month. First up we have, it's right here, A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. So I already have a reading blog up on my channel where I read this book. I also read The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shoup. And then I read A Daring Pursuit by Kate Bateman because those were all historical romances that came out on May 24th. So I definitely recommend checking out that vlog because I discussed this book at length. This is a stunning historical romance. This is about Justin, who's a duke, Viola, who is a trans heroine, and this is definitely more of like a character-driven story. So don't go into this thinking that it's gonna be like really fast-paced or like have the most exciting plot by any means. But yeah, I just couldn't help but give this 5 stars. I think it's one of the most beautifully written historical romances that I've read in a while or that I've ever read. Like, it's also just like a very unique story. It has a very unique feel to me, and I've never read anything else by Alexis Hall before, but after reading this, I'm definitely intrigued to read more by him, though I know that all of his other books seem to have a pretty different vibe from this one. Next up, we have Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood. This is one of the novellas in her like STEMinist series. It's a series of 3 novellas that she has been releasing throughout the year. The audiobooks came out first, but now she's slowly releasing the ebooks as well, which is why I finally read this one. This one is about Mara and Liam. They end up being roommates.
And they were roommates.
Oh my God, they were roommates.
Basically because Mara's mentor left her this house in her will, but the house, like half the house was left to Mara, half the house was left to Liam. Liam was Mara's mentor's niece. So it's like forced proximity. They're forced to be roommates. He's desperately trying to get her to let him buy out her half of the house so he can just own it. But she refuses to let go of the property, mainly because of sentimentality, but also because she has nowhere else to live. And so this is like a hate to love, enemies to lovers deal going on. I really enjoy this, especially because this is like a 4-hour audiobook. It's a very short novella, and it still feels like a very slow burn romance. By the time like they actually kissed and got together, like I was dying for them to kiss, you know? Like, I don't know how Ali Hazelwood did it, because, you know, with novellas, you don't have as much page time to work with to build that slow burn relationship. But I thought it was really well done, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the novellas in this series. Next up, we have Woke Up Wed by Cassie Mint. This is a part of a novella series that she wrote that features brides in some way. I can't remember what the series is called, but I mean, they're all standalones. They just all center around that theme. So yeah, this is the first novella in the series. This centers around Effie and Guy. And Effie is essentially Guy's assistant, and they go to Las Vegas so that Guy can get a new client to sign on with him. But at the very beginning of the novella, they both wake up in Effie's hotel suite, and it turns out that things got crazy the night before and they got married. Oops. And this is also kind of a grumpy sunshine dynamic, and Effie has always felt that her boss Guy has always just kind of been annoyed by her and like doesn't like her. Meanwhile, he's kind of been pining after her this whole time, which we love a pining hero. And this was just the perfect woke up in Vegas married novella. It was such a fun time because throughout the story, they're trying to retrace their steps of like what led them to getting married. And it was just so fun. Perfect amount of steam. I had to give it 5 stars. Like, Cassie Mint, at this point, there's very few novellas of hers that I give less than 5 stars. Like, she, oh my God, her novellas are just like the perfect boost of serotonin, and they'll just make you so happy and giddy, and like, yeah, this was no exception. Next up, we have Seatmate by Cara Bastone. This is book 3 in her, like, she has this Audible audiobook series. They are a series of romance novella audiobooks. By the way, all 3 of these are like no heat at all, because each of these ends right when the couple is actually getting together. So we might see them kiss once, but that's it. So if you are interested in like low heat or no heat romances, I highly, highly recommend this series of audiobook. I mean, also the production value is absolutely fantastic, and this one had like a ton of narrators, which was really fun. The plot of this one centers around Sam and Gwen. They end up being seatmates on this bus, I believe from Boston to New York, and they just strike up this conversation and get to know each other. And it wasn't my absolute favorite of this series, but it was a very good time, very well done. Sweet Talk is definitely my favorite of the 3 novellas, but yeah, I definitely recommend this one. It was also nice to listen to this one because I was driving to Atlanta for a weekend trip. I actually have a reading blog or a vlog all about that experience, and I'll link that up in the cards above if you're interested. But yeah, so this was nice to listen to while I was on a road trip myself. Next up, we have The Scandalous, No Good, Dissolute Mr. Right. I got the title right. By Tessa Dare. This is a novella that I think was originally published as a part of some kind of like historical romance novella anthology. But I was turned on to this novella. I mean, I'm already a huge fan of Tessa Dare, but I wasn't really interested in reading this novella until I heard Ava from Ava's Romance Books rave about this one, specifically that it has great banter. So I had to give this one a chance. I have found all of Tessa Dare's audiobooks on my Hoopla, so you guys might be able to access them on Hoopla as well. It just depends with your library. I gave this 5 stars, and nobody is surprised. I think that this is some of the absolute best banter that Tessa Dare has ever written. And I know that is a huge claim because Tessa Dare is a master at writing banter, but I truly, truly think this is some of her best work in that regard. This one's about Eliza and Harry, takes place over a few years from what I can recall. Harry is, as you can probably tell from the title, he's this rake. And basically him and Eliza meet at these various social events and they kind of fall for each other that way. And this was very funny, also very sweet and charming, and the romance actually kind of got me in my feels towards the end, which is really why I gave it 5 stars. So I definitely recommend this one. It's a very short novella. You'll have a really good time with it. The next book that I have is Praise by Sara Cate. By the way, you might recall that I did discuss these last few books in my weekend vlog where I went to Atlanta. This centers around Emerson, who is the co-owner of a sex club, and Charlie, our heroine. There is quite the age gap between these two characters. Emerson, he's probably just about 40, and Charlie's, I think, 22, something like that. The beginning of the book, she's been dating this guy, Beau. But Beau doesn't treat her all that well, and so they end up, she breaks up with him and leaves him, but she has to go meet Beau's father to get her security deposit back for the apartment that they were living in. And so this is a romance between Emerson, Beau's father, and Charlie, and this is called Praise because there's a lot of praise kink. This is a dominant submissive relationship. I really enjoyed how this book specifically set up the series as a whole and all of the other characters that we're going to be focusing on throughout the series. I definitely enjoyed the romance between Charlie and Emerson. It wasn't like my favorite thing ever. I'm not really sure what was holding me back with their romance. Like, I just didn't completely, I guess I just didn't completely emotionally attach to this couple. I'm not sure if it's because of the age gap. I'm not sure if I feel like there were some aspects of their dominant submissive relationship that weren't my absolute favorite. So because of that, I didn't give it 5 stars, but I do recommend it. And I'm still very excited to move on with the series because I know the audiobook for book 2 is already out and book 3 just came out. So next up we have Runaway Bride by Cassie Mint, another novella in that novella series that I mentioned earlier. And this one is a mafia romance, and I think that Cassie Mint writes mafia romances so well. Like, I highly recommend that you check out her mafia novellas. But this one's called Runaway Bride because we have Leo, who is a mafioso, and we have, what's her name, Mia. Mia is a mafia princess who she has known for quite a few years that she was gonna marry this one man who's basically like in a rival mafia family. But on the day that they are set to meet up and I guess actually plan their wedding and stuff, Leo shows up, who is that guy's brother. And Leo straight up tells Mia, oh, I killed him because I want you for myself. So iconic. And so then they are set to get married, but she runs away, hence the title. She gets on a train, but Leo tracks her down pretty easily. And so what ensues is this amazing game of cat and mouse. And oh, I love Leo so much because he's just one of those heroes that will follow the heroine to the ends of the earth to have her. And he is just so obsessed with her, so in love with her. Yeah, this was so good. Definitely my favorite novella of this series. So if you want just one recommendation from this series, go with this one. I promise you'll have a good time. Just so fun. Next up, we have Bound to a Warrior by Donna Fletcher. This is a book that came highly recommended from Jen from the Book Refuge. So I was very excited to get to this one. This is a Scottish medieval romance about our two main characters, Mercy and Duncan. Basically at the very beginning of this book, they are shackled together, as you can see on the cover, because they're both enemies of the King of Scotland. And so they're shackled together and then they are set to be murdered. I think like his soldiers are just gonna like push them over a cliff, but they end up escaping. And so what ensues is a pretty low angst romance, and it's just the two of them trying to survive and trying to get away from the king's men and trying to get back to Duncan's family's clan, like their keep. And I thought this was solid. I gave it 4 stars. Like I said, pretty low angst. The conflict comes from like outside sources, as you can tell from my setup. Yeah, I'm not quite sure that medieval romances are my jam. I like them, I don't think I've ever given one 5 stars. I just feel like there's something about the setting and the time period that I'm just not as invested in as I am with like 1800s romances, whether that be like Regency era or Victorian or whatever. And that's just something I've learned about my reading taste. It's not that like medieval romances are bad by any means. It's just like, I don't know that like they're my cup of tea. But next up, we have a book that is so my cup of tea. That is Broken Vow by Sophie Lark. Like, y'all don't even know how excited I am to talk about this book. Oh my God. This is book 5 in Sophie Lark's Brutal Birthright series, which is a mafia romance series. This one centers around Riona, who is a part of the Griffin family, which is the Irish mafia family that this series centers around. If you don't know anything about this series, it basically centers around the Gallows, which is an Italian mafia family, and the Griffins, which is an Irish mafia family. So we have Riona, and someone is trying to murder her. Pretty much at the very beginning of the book, she is swimming in her apartment complex's pool, and this person just comes out of nowhere and tries to drown her, and it's crazy. And so then basically Dante, who is a really good friend of hers, he's one of the Gallows. He was the hero in the previous book, Bloody Heart. Anyway, he decides to get his really good friend Raylan to be Riona's bodyguard while they try to figure out what the heck is going on, who is his assassin, who put the hit out on her, right? And Riona and Raylan met at around the end of the previous book, and I was already obsessed with their dynamic because it's totally a grumpy, icy heroine meets a sunshiny, charming hero. I'm pretty sure at this point that's like my absolute favorite trope. I can't get enough of it. And so yeah, we saw in that previous book already just how like Raylan gets under Riona's skin. And so now he's her bodyguard, and she's definitely not happy about this. I loved this so freaking much. This is easily my favorite book of the series so far. I don't think Heavy Crown, which is the 6th and final book, is going to top this one. I just could not get enough of these two characters together and their insane chemistry, how they fall for each other. Oh my God, the steamy scenes in this, guys. Some of the best steam that I've read from Sophie Lark, which is really saying something because she pretty much always serves with steamy scenes, but like there's some like surprise BDSM in this. Yeah, I could talk about this book for hours if given the chance, so let's go ahead and move on. Next book we have is another fantastic 5-star read. This was The Long Game by Rachel Reed. This is technically like book, I want to say like book 6 or so. And she has this hockey romance, hockey romance series, but I just went ahead and read this after reading Heated Rivalry, which is technically book 2 of this series. But basically the deal is Heated Rivalry is about Shane and Elia falling in love, and they get like a happy for now ending, and then The Long Game is their sequel. So it's all about Shane and Elia, so you definitely do not need to read any of the other books in the series. I definitely didn't, and I do not feel like I missed anything by any means. But this was beautiful, fantastic. I will say it's kind of a long book. Like, it was like a 13-hour audiobook, and maybe that's a tad too long, but something about Rachel Reed's writing, I didn't care. Like, I could have easily read a few more hours of their story. Like, there is just something about Shane and Elia and her writing and just their story, like, that is just so addictive and so compulsively readable, so beautiful, great steam. Yeah, it's just a fantastic hockey romance. Can't recommend it enough. Like, seriously, Shane and Elia have my heart. They are truly soulmates. I cannot recommend this little duet within this series enough. I also appreciated that this book focuses a good bit on Elia and his mental health because he's dealing with depression. I thought that that was really well done as well. Next up we have Mail Order Vow, which is another novella in that Bride series that I've been talking about by Cassie Mint. So this one is about Murray and Jessica. As you can probably tell from the title, this is about a mail order bride situation. Basically both Murray and Jessica went on this like mail order bride website. They matched up to each other, and so they make this deal to meet up for 24 hours, and then at the end of that 24 hours they decide if they want to stay together and get married. So kind of a crazy plot, but I mean, Cassie Mint always makes it work. So this was so freaking sweet and adorable. Oh my god, like this gave me so many butterflies in my stomach, just made my heart ache. Like this kind of reads like a friends to lovers romance, and there's mutual pining. Like even though these two people just met, there's mutual pining. And I also really appreciated that both characters were virgins. You don't get that very often in Cassie Mint novellas, where like the hero is a virgin, but I really appreciated that. Also, we have a scarred hero, and he's kind of a recluse. He just owns and runs this lighthouse. And yeah, I thought that this was exquisite. I highly recommend this one. It gave this one 5 stars as well. Next up, we have Everything for You by Chloe Leese. This is book 5 in her Bergman Brothers series. This is also the first romance in this series, which is exciting to see. This is about Oliver Bergman, who's one of the younger siblings in the family. He is a professional soccer player. And this is his romance with Gavin, who is one of his teammates. But Gavin's about 10 years older than Oliver, and he's getting towards the end of his career. Gavin is definitely a grumpy hero, but what's also cool about Gavin is that he's openly gay, which is very unusual in any kind of sports industry, and you wouldn't really expect that from someone like Gavin just because he is so brooding and grumpy. But I thought that was a really cool aspect of his character. And so he's actually dealing with a lot of chronic pain, especially like in his knee, because like I said, he's very close to retirement. His body is worn out. And so that's one of the main reasons why he's especially grumpy. But then the coach of their team makes them co-captains, and Gavin does not take well to that news. So this is definitely a hate to love situation. There's a lot of tropes in this. Let me look at my notes. Grumpy sunshine, age gap, because there's like 10 years between the two of them. They're neighbors, they're next door neighbors. Workplace, because they're both, you know, on the soccer team together. Also, there is a scene where there's only one bed. And like I said, there's really great representation of chronic pain, and there's also really great representation of anxiety, because Oliver deals with anxiety. But yeah, this was just another really great installment of the series. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars. Needless to say, I really enjoyed it. I especially liked how Gavin and Oliver bonded over musicals, specifically Hamilton and Sondheim musicals. I mean, come on, iconic. Next up, we have Heartless Duke by Scarlett Scott. This is book 2 in her League of Duke series. I was so excited to read this one after reading Nobody's Duke in May, and absolutely adoring that book. I've talked about that book already several times on my channel, but basically it gave me very strong Again the Magic vibes, which is a historical romance by Lisa Kleypas. So yeah, I was excited about this one too, because the heroine of this one was kind of the villain at the end of book 1. So this is about Bridget. She has gotten herself mixed up in this radical Irish group. So Bridget has gotten herself mixed up with these people, and they've given her an assignment to kidnap someone. The kidnapping goes wrong because Leo, our hero, puts a stop to it. And so it becomes this like captor-captive situation, because he takes her to one of his estate. He ties her up so that he can interrogate her about who she's working for, this kidnapping plot, all, you know, everything like that. And so this was so good, because we have 2 very strong characters who feel very strongly in their beliefs, and Bridget is not going to yield to Leo's interrogation, and they just have absolutely insane chemistry. And so like while he's trying to interrogate her, it usually just winds up they start making out, and it's a good time, you know. Great steamy scenes with a bit of bondage. not having to do with her being his captive, that it's kind of a different scene. And then also I loved that throughout the book, Leo calls her Banshee, and it starts out as an insult because obviously he hates her. There, you know, this is definitely an enemies to lover situation, but throughout the book, it eventually becomes a term of endearment, and I just love that so much. So yeah, I don't know if I stated this, but I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was great. Maybe not quite as good as Nobody's Duke, but pretty darn close. Next up, we have Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This is a thriller novel, and this is my second book now that I've read by this author. I read Little Secrets by her a couple years ago, and I loved that book. I gave it 5 stars, so I have really been looking forward to reading some more works by this author, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. The basic premise centers around Gio, our main character, or Georgina, and how her best friend Angela went missing when they were in high school, and we learn at the very beginning that both Gio and her boyfriend at the time, Calvin, had something to do with Angela's murder. And so basically Gio ends up going to prison for 5 years because of her role in all of that. And so yeah, we follow Gio when she's in prison, and then when she gets out, there is this string of serial murders happening, and all signs are pointing to that it could be Calvin, her boyfriend from high school, because he was sentenced to life in prison, but he escaped. And so yeah, everybody just assumes that it's Calvin, and so they're trying to catch him, and things go on from there. This is a pretty dark thriller. I mean, thrillers as a genre tend to be very dark. Definitely look out for the content warnings, but 2 big content warnings I would point out to you now is that there are several instances of sexual assault, and there are several instances where a dismembered corpse is described kind of in detail. Like I said, I liked this one. I thought that the pacing was really well done. This had really intriguing characters as well, which is what you want in a thriller. But for me, one of the big major plot twists fell flat because I felt like it didn't feel all that organic. It kind of felt like maybe it came kind of out of nowhere, and I can't say much without spoiling it, but bottom line is I was just kind of disappointed by one of the plot twists. But I still liked this one. I'm still definitely looking forward to reading more from this author. Next up, we have The Younger Wife by Sally Hepworth. This is my 3rd book that I have read by this author. She writes mystery thriller novels. This is definitely my least favorite of her books. At the time that I read it, I gave it 4 stars, but upon reflection, it's definitely more of a 3-star book. Basically, the plot centers around these 2 sisters, and then their father is marrying someone who's about their age, so that's why it's called The Younger Wife. And I will say there were some intriguing characters, very well paced. Kind of hard for me to describe what I was disappointed by with this book without spoiling it, but what I will say is that I feel like this book falls into a very stereotypical path that a lot of thrillers fall into in terms of like who the real villain of the story is. So yeah, like there definitely weren't any like really shocking plot twists. Also, the ending wasn't really an ending. Like the book just kind of stopped. So I don't recommend this. I would recommend though, I believe it's The Mother-in-Law, and there's one where there's like sister in the title that I really enjoyed, but this one definitely was not it. Then for the final novella in that Cassie Mint series I've been talking about, we have Fake Fiance. So this one has to do with twins. I feel like Cassie Mint is like fascinated by twins because I've read a whole novella series by her that's centered around twins. But anyways, this one has to do with a prince. His name is Alden, and then Beatrice. So he's the prince of a fictional kingdom, and I don't think she's a princess, but her and her sister, I believe, are like members of nobility of like the neighboring kingdom. And so Alden and Beatrice's twin sister Olympia have been betrothed to each other for years. And so then they finally have this big like engagement announcement ball, but Olympia doesn't show up. She's run off with her scuba instructor, and so Beatrice ends up pretending to be Olympia to cover her ass basically, but Beatrice ends up falling in love with Alden herself. And so obviously things are a bit messy because of the whole like hidden identity thing. I mean, this was definitely my least favorite of the novella series, but I still definitely enjoyed it. I pretty much always enjoy anything I read by Cassie Mint. Like, it's very unusual for me to give any of her novellas less than 4 stars. Next is When a Girl Loves an Earl by Lisa Braden. This is book 5 in her Rescued from Ruin series, and what's interesting about this book is that the heroine Viola is the one relentlessly pursuing our hero James. I will throw out there that I wasn't all that excited going into this book because I don't love reading about heroines pursuing heroes. I'd much prefer the flip side of that. Although I have read a couple romances where the heroine is the one pursuing the hero, and I have enjoyed them, but more often than not I would rather the hero be the pursuer. And so I was pleasantly surprised by this one. I ended up giving like 4.5 stars. This ends up being a marriage of convenience, and yes, I will throw out there that our hero James, he can be quite an ass at times to Viola, but he does learn from his mistakes, and there was a really beautiful grand gesture that he did towards the end that I really appreciated. So I'll give him a pass because he learned from his mistakes, you know, and I do think he groveled well enough, you know. And oh, I also really like that there was some really great relationships going on, like Viola starts to bond with her stepmother-to-be, and then I loved James's friendship with Lucian, who was the hero from book 1, which is, what is it, The Madness of Lord Atherborn. I love that book and I love Lucian, so I really loved seeing him and James be best friends together. So yeah, this was just a good one. Not my absolute favorite of the series, but a very solid installment. All right, we are done with the makeup look. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Very last book I want to talk about is Wicked Beauty by Katie Robert. I just finished this late last night, and this is the latest book in her Dark Olympus series. This one centers around Achilles, Patroclus, and Helen. And what's really fun about this one is that not only is it a poly romance, which is really exciting considering that this is a traditionally published series, but this also features a Hunger Games-like series of trials, because basically what we have going on in the city of Olympus, there are these 13 titles. They're all named after Greek gods and goddesses. And so the title of Ares is one of the few titles that anyone can have. Most of the titles are passed down through families, but this one anyone can have as long as you win these series of trials. And so Helen is determined to become the next Ares, but at the very beginning of the book, her brother Perseus is the new Zeus, and Perseus makes it a rule that whoever wins the title of Ares gets to marry Helen. So Helen is now a prize to be won, and so at first she thinks that she can't compete anymore, and so she's really pissed off about that. Then we have Achilles and Patroclus, who are also competing to be the next Ares, and so things go on from there. I really loved how like Achilles and Helen had this like hate to love dynamic, and then Patroclus is definitely a softer hero. And also Patroclus and Achilles already had an established relationship, and so it was really cool to see how Helen fit into their already established relationship. I just loved the dynamic between the three of them. Like, they are truly the perfect throuple, mainly because they all bring different skills and different personality traits to the table, and they just all work so well together. And typical of Katie Robert, this was very hot, really great steamy scenes, and I really loved the pacing of this, and I also really loved how well the romance was balanced with these action scenes from these trials. I just thought that it was all really well done. I think this is my favorite book of the series so far, which is really saying a lot because I personally really loved Neon Gods, which was book 1 of the series. So I'm just even more excited for future books to come out. I believe Radiant Sin, which is the next book, is coming out in January of next year, which is so exciting. So that is going to be it for my mid-June reading wrap up. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I'm actually getting ready to go film my mid-year book freak out tag. So that should already be uploaded when I post this video. So I will definitely link that up in the cards above if you are interested. And I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books that I brought up in this video, or if you want to tell me about books that you have been reading and loving in June. And with all that being said, I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe. And I thank you so much in advance if you do. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.